Hello, my name is Christy and I'm going to go into depth with you about four of the war poems. They are by Rupert Brooke, Wilfred Owen, Siegfried Sassoon, and Isaac Rosenberg. These poets all served during World War I and wrote on behalf of their fellow soldiers and country. Due to the context of these poems, I will advise you, if you do not recall what occurred in World War I, to pause this video and take a moment to research it, because I am not going to have the time to go into depth about the war itself. I will, however, give a mini review of the war. The First World War began with the domino effect of allies. Once two countries declared war on one another, the whole continent of Europe was at war. Along with being the First World War, this war was the first that trench warfare was created. It consisted of dug trenches being protected with barbed wire fences. The war also consisted of machine guns and chemical warfare, which the tactics of old warfare had not caught up to the machinery of the time. The combination of these created gruesome events that caused such an inspiration in the hearts and words of these four poets. Throughout these poems, I have used my own understanding of the war, as well as an overall understanding from reading many sources, which I have listed on the title slide of each poem and on the final slide. If I pull a specific insight from a specific critic, I will say who it is from. The first poem we'll be analyzing today is The Soldier by Rupert Brooke. Rupert Brooke was quite famous for his dramatic sonnets. This one, The Soldier, is the last of 5 sonnets in a series. It is Petrarchan, containing 2 stanzas, the first with 8 lines, an octet, and the second with 6 lines, a sestet. It is Petrarchan because of the rhyme scheme not ending in a couplet. It is very easy to tangle Brooke's themes of patriotism, heaven, and freedom. Patriotism and heaven are 2 themes that go hand in hand due to the view that the English had of their home, England. Because this war was the first in about 80 years for the British, and for their high-standing status in the world, they romanticized the war. Along with that, they viewed England as their heaven on earth. You will see this a lot in the imagery of England resembling peace or that of heaven. The English soldiers joined the armed forces willingly because they romanticized about England's status and what it meant to be a hero and die for their country, not knowing what they volunteered themselves into. The theme throughout The Soldier is also viewed through the imagery of England, primarily because Brooke joined the war to escape his personal problems. Therefore, the longing for freedom in his heart could not escape his writing. Rupert Brooke exhibits that he is a Georgian poet in this sonnet, as he combines romanticism, patriotism, and nature. He continued to view the war this way because he never made it to the war. He actually died on the way to battle via blood poisoning. Sonnets and alliteration are very strong throughout Brooke's poems, which we will take a closer look at when dissecting it. Let's begin with stanza 1, the octet. As you see, I have created a table for each of the stanzas, including the line numbers as well as the rhyme scheme. If I should die, think only this of me. Let's go ahead and stop here. The if in the beginning of the stanza and the beginning of the sonnet is so important. It points out that the speaker is aware of what could occur in war, in death. He is leaving a legacy if that should occur. The sonnets in this line is heavy with the I's. If I should die, think only this of me. Let's continue. That there's some corner of a foreign field that is forever England. Already we see the England's imagery, the nature, corner of a foreign field. That is forever England. This goes back to English no longer being the greatest standing country, except in the English's mind. In that rich earth, a richer dust concealed, a dust whom England bore, shaped, made aware. The richer dust, a dust whom England bore. Dust is a metaphor for the people, just like Adam from the Bible was made from dust. And there's great biblical imagery here. The English people's bodies, everyone for that matter, is made up of dust by the earth. But the English were specifically patriotic, and they were a part of their country, England, and they have so much pride in that. Gave. Once her flowers to love, her ways to roam, a body of England's, breathing English air. Washed by the rivers, blessed by the sons of home. Brooke gives us such great visual imagery of the peacefulness of England, the English land, the countrysides. Gives us such imagery of where the soldiers are coming from. And the imagery gives us the themes of heaven and of freedom when he uses the words field, roaming, English air, washed by the rivers. There's such purity and cleanliness in them. And think, this heart, all evil shed away, a pulse in the eternal mind, no less. So Brooke's tone shifts here. An eternal mind, a pulse in the eternal mind, no less. This soldier's mind is shift to thinking of the eternal. But he's not dead, because there's still a pulse in his mind. The if from the first stanza, from the first line, still stands. But this heart, all evil has shed away. The evils of the war cannot overtake the soldier's life once they have already died. Or maybe the speaker is just saying the death of the war is removing the evil from everyone's hearts and has not taken the life of the speaker. There is alliteration in line 9. And think this heart, the THs. And think this heart, all evil shed away, a pulse in the eternal mind, no less. Give somewhere back the thoughts by England given, her sights and sounds, dreams happy as her day, and laughter learnt of friends and gentleness, and hearts at peace under an English heaven. No matter if the speaker does die, we as the readers need to know that their heart will be under the English heaven. But until then, the soldiers will be honored to fight for their beloved country and loved ones. Even during battle, the English will be dreaming of their English heaven while fighting, to keep them sane and alive in the midst of the hell they are enduring. The second poem we are going to look at is The Anthem of Doomed Youth by Wilfred Owen. Anthem of Doomed Youth is another dramatic sonnet, but this sonnet is a mix between Shakespearean and Petrarchan because its final two lines in the sestet are a couplet. For the Anthem of Doomed Youth, we need to first and foremost understand what the title means. It is a song devoted to those in battle and includes holy rituals for those that have passed away. Some themes and devices to look for and take note of in this poem are the disillusionment of the soldiers and the people of England and the conditions of their soldiers. Because, as I said before, they have such high expectations of England that the British romanticize the war and what it would be like to be fighting for one's country. Innocence is another theme that comes in, as well as Owen's irony. He uses irony against the holy rituals for the dead To display the fact that these young soldiers, innocent, are being taken away in what they witnessed in the war in death, as well as suffering from shell shock if they survive the war. The anthem of doomed youth is exhibiting a eulogy. The way the sonnet stands up against the belittlement of those who died in the war is in the ironic tone that condemns those who are claiming to honor the dead but are actually mocking them. Owen describes these themes to you via auditory and visual imagery. The first stanza is full of auditory imagery, and the second, visual imagery. Owen's poetry did not become widely popular until the end of the war, and because of that, its popularity did not last long. This is not due to his words or talent in writing poetry, but because of its readers' attitudes towards the war. Once the war was over, no one wanted to go back and visit it, but heal and move past the tragedy. Stanza 1. What passing bells for these who die as cattle? Only the monstrous anger of the guns. Only the stuttering rifle's rapid rattle can patter out their hasty orisons. No mockeries now for them, no prayers nor bells, nor any voice of mourning save the choirs. The shrill, demented choirs of wailing shells, and bugles calling for them from sad shires. We can see, after reading the first line, that we, the readers, are being asked a rhetorical question. But what are these passing bells? Passing bells are bells that announce a death. During this time period, announcing deaths were primarily due to war. The ironic tone begins in the first line, setting the tone for the entire sonnet. For those who die as cattle is a simile, a comparison, so as readers we can gather it is not about the cattle but the soldiers. How can they be like cattle? The soldiers were slaughtered in the field. Lines 2 through 4. Only the monstrous anger of the guns, only the stuttering rifle's rapid rattle, can patter out their hasty orisons. Here we see what caused the death of the soldiers. The auditory imagery and onomatopoeia are used to grab the reader's attention and senses. What are the orisons in line 4? Orisons are another holy context. They are prayers. Owen is stating that the soldiers can have nothing more than a quick prayer, if that, as their lives are taken for them. Lines 5 and 6. No mockeries for them now, no prayers nor bells, nor any voice of mourning, save the choirs. Owen is saying, save the choirs. You don't need them at the funeral, because they're not getting one. They don't need prayers or bells. Soldiers have no funeral. Lines 7 and 8. The shrill, demented choirs of wailing shells, and bugles calling for them from sad shires. Instead of choirs, beautiful choirs singing at their funeral, they get the sound of continuous gunfire. The bugles in line 8 symbolize two parts of the war and two parts of the soldiers' lives. As line 8 says, bugles calling for them from sad shires. The shires are the soldiers' homes. Bugles are a symbol of those that have died. But not only that, but bugles are the first sound of war the soldiers hear. It's a symbol of the beginning of the war, of the beginning of the soldiers waiting for their death to come. Stanza 2. What candles may be held to speed them all, not in the hands of boys, but in their eyes, shall shine the holy glimmers of goodbyes. The pallor of girls' brows shall be their pall, Their flowers, the tenderness of patient minds, and each slow dusk a drawing down of blinds. Clearly, Owen begins with another rhetorical question, and has transferred from auditory imagery to visual imagery. Lines 9 through 11 are an extended metaphor. What candles may be held to speed them all, not in the hands of boys, but in their eyes, shall shine the holy glimmers of goodbyes. The different types of light are parallel to the soldiers' lives being extinguished. Line 12. The pallor of girls' brows shall be their pall. A pallor is a paleness of someone primarily from fear or death. The young girls are fearful for the boys and the men in their lives. A pall is a cloth that is draped over a coffin. This line is another metaphor full of visual imagery that Owen uses to show us the depth of the pain every person touched by the war faces. But not only that, Owen is saying that these soldiers that have laid down their lives for their countries don't even get a simple pall placed over their coffin. In lines 13 and 14. Their flowers the tenderness of patient minds, and each slow dusk a drawing down of blinds. Nor do the soldiers get flowers on their graves. They don't have graves. In light 13, the patient minds. Siegfried Sassoon actually influenced Wilfred Owen while they were in the same hospital. Owen had said their flowers the tenderness of silent minds, but Sassoon persuaded him to put patient. Patient as in the families are being patient and waiting for their families to come home, and the soldiers are being patient, waiting to die. In each slow dusk a drawing down of blinds. As the sun sets, the soldiers are waiting for their lives to set as well. I received the information about Siegfried Sassoon influencing Wilfred Owen about the patient mind via Matthew Parfitt's analysis of Anthem for Doomed Youth and the 2011 Cengage Learning Analysis. We as readers feel Owen's harshness towards those who do not give their soldiers the proper respect and ignore the weight of their sacrifice. We know how much these soldiers have sacrificed and believe they deserve so much more than anyone else that died naturally, and they don't even get the same respect as them. Owen began as a romantic poet but ended as a Freudian in thought, due to the harshness of the trenches. I will explain what it is to be Freudian a little more in detail with the last poem by Siegfried Sassoon. This is where the imagery gets brutal in war poetry. We now get a complete visual of Isaac Rosenberg's experience in trench warfare by reading Dead Man's Dump. Disclaimer: this poem is quite graphic. This is because Rosenberg does not use sentimentality but pity towards the bodies, as he remains objective and not emotional during the war. Many soldiers had to do this quite often in order to remain alive during combat. Here are a few visuals of what Rosenberg meant by Dead Man's Dump. There were so many bodies from World War I that there was no burial grounds. Any ground was a burial ground. This poem is the longest out of the 4 that we are going to dissect together. It is 12 stanzas long with 86 inconsistent rhymed lines. As I stated earlier, this is one of the rawest war poems, but Rosenberg uses controlled form but chaos in his words, metaphorically demonstrating the controlling of emotion physically, but losing it mentally. A little side note about Rosenberg. He did not join the military out of romanticism nor patriotism, but financial desperation. Therefore, his outlook on the war is drastically different from other war poets we are reading from today. Dead Man's Dump has very strong imagery and little emotion. We need to be on the lookout for similes, metaphors, alliteration, and enjambment in Rosenberg's verses. The plunging limbers over the shattered track, racketed with their rusty freight, stuck out like many crowns of thorns, and the rusty stakes like scepters old, to stay the flood of brutish men upon our brothers dear. Clearly we already see strong visual imagery. Rosenberg is describing the 2 old carts that carry the barbed wire to protect the trenches. In line 3, the crown of thorns are a simile to the thorns that Jesus Christ wore during his crucifixion. The soldiers signed up to sacrifice their lives in protecting themselves and their brothers. Stanza 2. The wheels lurched over sprawled dead, but pain them not, though their bones crunched, their shut mouths made no moan, they lie there huddled, friend and foeman, man born of man and born of woman, and shells go crying over them from night to night and night. This is where the name Dead Man's Dump comes into play. Rosenberg's pity is exhibiting the battlefield as a massive grave. The bodies are not discriminated against one another, and no one living cares about them because they know there's nothing more they can do for them. The bodies are lying around in plain sight as the battle continues. Stanza 3. Earth has waited for them all the time of their growth, fretting for their decay. Now she has them at last, in the strength of their strength, suspended, stopped, and held. This stanza reminds me of Brooks the Soldier. We can see how Earth has been given life in personification and is awaiting the bodies of the soldiers' fierce strength. Stanza 4. What fierce imaginings their dark souls lit! Earth, have they gone into you? Somewhere they must have gone, and flung on your hard back is their soul sack, emptied of God ancestral essences. Who hurled them out? Who hurled? Rosenberg's tone switches in the stanza to the wondering of afterlife for the soldiers. For this stanza, I gained most of my insights from Banner G in the article State of Letters, where it says, Rosenberg moves from the physical scene to create an imaginative vision of the afterlife of the dead soldiers. Banner G sheds the light needed on this stanza as readers attempt to follow his change in tone. Stanza 5. None saw their spirit's shadow shake the grass, or stood aside for the half-used life to pass out of those doomed nostrils and the doomed mouth, when the swift iron burning bee drained the wild honey of their youth. We can see again that Rosenberg is still in the soulful prospect of the soldiers instead of the physical. Their souls were unfound after leaving their bodies in death. We continue to see alliteration, the inconsistent rhyming, as well as personification that Rosenberg uses to get his point across. Stanza 6. What of us who flung on the shrieking pyre walk our usual thoughts untouched, our lucky limbs as ichor fed, immortal seeming ever? Perhaps when the flames beat loud on us, a fear may choke in our veins, and the startled blood may stop. Immediately as I read this stanza, I looked up 2 words, both definitions I gathered from dictionary.com. A pyre is a heap of combustible material, especially one for burning a corpse as part of a funeral ceremony. So in line 32, the pyre is the only form of a funeral procession for these soldiers that willingly lay down their lives for their country. And the ichor the fluid that flows like blood in the veins of gods. Those soldiers that are still living feel lucky for the moment as they feel like they have that ichor in their blood, in their veins. Stanza 7. The air is loud with death. The dark air spurts with fire. The explosions ceaseless are. Timelessly now, some minutes past, those dead strode time with vigorous life, till the shrapnel called an end. But not to all. In bleeding pangs, some borne on stretchers dreamed of home, dear things war blotted from their hearts. This stanza leaves me speechless in Rosenberg's personification and how he uses his words so his readers can feel the hurt, the pain, the silence, yet the noise that the soldiers are feeling. He uses complete irony with how he phrases his sentences in his controlled form, yet chaotic words, in order to allow us to feel the soldier's pain. This stanza was actually left out of the Norton Anthology, but was found on the poetryfoundation.com. So since it was found, I decided to use it. I would never want to leave out part of Rosenberg's poems, or anyone's poems. Stanza 8. Maniac earth, howling and flying your bowel, seared by the jagged fire, the iron love, the impetuous storm of savage love. Dark earth, dark heavens, swinging in chemic smoke, what dead are born when you kiss each soundless soul, with lightning and thunder from your mind heart, which man self-dug and his blind fingers loosed. This stanza is full of personification in order to give more life to objects than to the corpses lying around, to the bodies that should currently be alive. Stanza 9. A man's brains splattered on a stretcher-bearer's face. His shook shoulders slipped their load, but when they bent to look again, the drowning soul was sunk too deep for human tenderness. They left the stead with the older dead, stretched at the crossroads, burnt black by strange decay. Their sinister faces lie, the lid over each eye, the grass and colored clay. More motion have they, joins to the great sunk silences. Visual imagery becomes dominant again. Visualize what he is seeing. Can you imagine seeing these bodies lying there with no funeral, no honoring, just like in the anthem of doomed youth? The fact that the grass and ground have more motion than many of the people on the battlefield is due to the number of soldiers that have died and yet are still lying there. Here is one not long dead. His dark hearing caught our far wheels, and the choked soul stretched weak hands to reach the living word. The far wheels said, the blood-dazed intelligence beating for light, crying through the suspense of the far torturing wheel, swift for the end to break, or the wheels to break, cried as the tide of the world broke over his sight. Will they come? Will they ever come? Even as the mixed hoofs of the mules, the quivering bellied mules, and the rushing wheels all mixed with his tortured upturned sight. So we crashed round the bend. We heard his weak scream. We heard his very last sound, and our wheels grazed his dead face. If Rosenberg hadn't been able to objectify himself in living through these scenes and writing down these words, we would not be able, as readers, to feel the rawness, to put ourselves in the scenes of World War One. And that is important as we learn history, so it will not be repeated. Isaac Rosenberg's Dead Man's Dump is personally the rawest poem I have ever read. But I do not know which is worse, being a soldier and living in the war and dying, or the fact that the soldiers had to continue living the war once they got out of the war. That would be called shell shock. Shell shock is where a soldier literally lives the war every day of their life, even though they're not in the war. The repression of war experienced by Siegfried Sassoon will explain what that means to live in shell shock. In the title, Repression of War Experience, most of us know what repression means, but I believe it is important to emphasize the title of poetry. I have listed here a definition of repression, and it means the rejection from consciousness of painful or disagreeable ideas, memories, feelings, or impulses. It relates back to what I said a moment ago about the soldiers living the war even though they are no longer in it. This is called shell shock, which we now know as PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, and it was primarily due to the new machine gun warfare at the time. The devices and themes to look for during repression of war experience are Sassoon's transition from being a romantic to Freudian. Sigmund Freud was a neurologist that suggested that along with two other parts of our mind, we have a superego, otherwise known as our subconscious. In this poem, we hear the speaker's thoughts conflict and his internal battle with his superego occur. Along with us hearing the speaker's thoughts, we also hear more than the speaker thinks he's revealing to us through his superego. This is all shown through dramatic irony. In Sassoon's diction, we hear subtle hints about how tragic the war is on a soldier during and after they leave the battlefield, but he never blatantly states that the war is wrong. Stanza 1. Now light the candles. 1, 2, there's a moth. What silly beggars they are to blunder in, and scorch their wings with glory, liquid fame. No, no, not that. It's bad to think of war, when thoughts you've gagged all day come back to scare you. And it's proved that soldiers don't go mad, unless they lose control of ugly thoughts that drive them out to jabber among the trees. In merely the first line, we can already see the remnants of shell shock via the speaker telling himself what to do step by step. Usually we only do that when we are attempting to distract ourselves from temptation. In lines 1 through 3, a moth enters the equation. The speaker is thinking of the moth as a soldier. The moth is willing to die by flying into the candlelight, just like soldiers were willing to die for their glory of their country and families. In lines 4 and 5, we can already see how the superego of the speaker came out and then was dismissed again. He began to think of war, and then he gagged the thought and ran away from it. Lines 6 through 8. The going mad. The speaker is talking about the shell shock and about what it does to the soldiers. If we were at all doubting that the speaker was a soldier, the term in line 8, to jabber, was a slang term used in the barracks of the soldiers. Now light your pipe. Look, what a steady hand. Draw a deep breath. Stop thinking. Count 15. And you're right as rain. Why won't it rain? I wish there'd be a thunderstorm tonight, with buckets full of water to sluice the dark and make the roses hang their dripping heads. Again in line 9, the speaker is telling himself what to do, describing his hand to himself. Lines 11 through 13. Rain is a great metaphor for the release of emotions. The speaker just wants to release all of his thoughts and feelings of the war. He wants to be rid of the past. Just like rain is the earth ridding of extra moisture onto the ground. In line 14, the word sluice emphasizes even more so because a sluice is an object that controls or directs water. The speaker doesn't want to sluice anymore. He just wants to release everything in him. In line 15, roses hanging their dripping heads are a metaphor for a sign of tragedy, which is obviously something this soldier has had occur in his life. Stanza 2 continued. Books, what a jolly company they are, standing so quiet and patient on their shelves, dressed in dim brown and black and white and green and every kind of color. Which will you read? Come on, oh do read something. They're so wise. I tell you, all the wisdom of the world is waiting for you on those shelves, and yet you sit and gnaw your nails, and let your pipe out, and listen to the silence on the ceiling. There's one big, dizzy moth that bumps and flutters, and in the breathless air outside the house, the garden waits for something that delays. There must be crowds of ghosts among the trees, not people killed in battle. They're in France. But horrible shapes and shrouds, old men who died, slow, natural deaths, old men with ugly souls, who wore their bodies out with nasty sins. Again, the speaker's trying to repress his war thoughts. And in lines 24 and 25, the moth is present again, aimless. Lines 26 and 27, there's irony in the breathless air. We can imagine how the soldiers feel in panic as they suffer in the pain of being attacked by gas warfare. The garden, just like in The Soldier by Rupert Brooke, is the earth receiving the death it created. The garden is waiting for the death of the soldiers, or something that delays, because it is only a certain amount of time before death occurs. Lines 28 through 32. These lines are showing how unfair it is, how much time those who do not fight in the war have in this lifetime. And the superego has won the battle of making the speaker think about war without him realizing it. This is a subconscious explanation of how the speaker views the short lives of the dead soldiers and of the civilians who did not fight. Stanza 3. You're quiet and peaceful, summering safe at home. You'd never think there was a bloody war on. Oh, yes, you would. Why, you can hear the guns. Hark! Thud, thud, thud. Quite soft. They never cease. Those whispering guns. Oh, Christ. I want to go out and screech at them to stop. I'm going crazy. I'm going stark, staring mad because of the guns. This stanza perfectly exhibits shell shock as the speaker is sitting quietly and peaceful at home, but his mind is going faster and faster and faster, crazier, 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 because of everything that happened in the war still existing in his head. In lines 36 through 39, it's evident that shell shock has not only crept in his mind but taken over. The auditory imagery, the begging from the speaker to his subconscious, to his superego, is pleading, saying, do not take me back there to war. But it's clearly too late. The speaker never left the war. It continued existing in his mind. Thank you for listening, everyone. I truly hope this helps you learn about the war poets and how to dissect poetry so you can best understand and enjoy it. Here are just a few more resources I used to learn about the poems. I realize I've kept you long enough, but just in case you wanted to learn a little something about who you've been listening to for all this time, Here's a bit about me. But don't worry, I won't keep talking. Instead, I'll let you listen to one of my favorite songs, Lift My Life Up by Unspoken. Enjoy!
You brought me this far, so why would I question you now? You have provided, so why would I start to doubt? I've never been stranded, abandoned, or left here to fight alone. So I'm giving you control. Sweep over me. If I'm under fire, I know it's refining me. When I hear